So very quickly, our Canoe Camping Club is hosted in the RA Center, and the RA Center represents one of those real gems that sits within the center of Ottawa. From the map, you'll see it's at the intersection of Bronson and Riverside, kitty corner to Carleton University. And there's a range of not only outdoor but indoor recreation facilities that are available, from softball to soccer, to even our own shed, as well as the pool facilities. And inside there's a range of facilities, including curling and hockey rinks, etc. Next slide, please. Very briefly, the RA Center, as I said, is a gem, and part of the reason it's a gem is the diversity of opportunities that it provides, both from a recreation standpoint, in terms of providing opportunities for people to demonstrate their hobbies as illustrated by this, whether it's like photography or pickleball or a stamp club, to sports and fitness opportunities, which also include therapeutic options as well, and personal training. Next slide, please. So if the RA Club is our host, the Canoe Camping Club actually has a long and extended history in the Canadian and the Ottawa context as an outdoor recreation organization. It actually starts in 1952, and it's one of those instances where, when I look back and we have a few activities going on to document our heritage, that, and I think it's 60 plus years that this club has been in existence, and the passion that obviously needs to be embedded in a community to continue to invest in an organization like this, and have it be so active from one year to the next, is a real demonstration of the community that I think the club has actually developed in that 60 plus years. We used to be hosted with the YMYWCA. In 2012, we moved to the RA Center. And as I mentioned in my opening comments, this organization is volunteer-based, volunteer-driven, and that I think is core to the defining feature of the club. Next slide, please, Mark. Now, what does the club offer? Well, the club offers, in a canoe camping context, a full slate of opportunities. So not only do we offer the opportunity for day, weekend, and longer trips, and weekend trips is a focus of today's presentation, we also provide programs across the Flatwater, Whitewater, and family community. It's supporting all of that is an active formal and informal training program. And what I mean by formal is we do offer certified training, Paddle Canada certified training in Flatwater and Whitewater. But I also raise the informal issue, the informal idea, because, actually participating, and for myself, some of the most abiding lessons I've learned in the last 7 to 8 years I've participated have been participating in day and week and weekend long trips, where the other trip leaders and trainers have just provided me that opportunity to learn some of the sort of the tips and tricks that go with not only having a fun time, but also a safe time. In addition to providing that sort of functional capacity and those skills, we also do provide canoe rentals and kayak rentals. We actually also have a sea kayaking program. Apologize, Dan, we do have a sea kayaking program. Sorry for that. We provide rentals to support people who don't have or can't make the investment to actively participate. And we have we have flatwater canoes, whitewater canoes, and we also have the sea kayaks that are available to support club-based activities, whether it's trips or training. We also have a range of additional equipment, whether it's helmets or paddles or life jackets, et cetera, to support those activities as well. Next slide, please. Now, as I said at the outset, I perhaps hinted at the outset, this really is a new process for ourselves back in the summer of last year, when the executive was talking about how we can engage with our community, and ideally through a time, and we're experiencing right now, where we expected a winter of confined opportunities, reduced opportunities for social interaction. How could our club create opportunities in a forum for our members and people who aren't members but part of the broader community to come together? And that's where we created this and made the substantial investment in hosting a succession of Wednesday seminars that stretch from January 27th, and will continue on till April 28th. It is a new process. Historically, we've done this in person. And as a consequence, we're constantly seeking your feedback, and your feedback to this point in time has been really key to helping us smooth some things out and enhancing not only our delivery in terms of how we structure things, but also some of the issues, technical issues we've encountered and hopefully addressed. In addition, we also are seeking your input when it comes to issues such as the additional opportunities for us to improve our delivery, whether you would see this as being an ongoing opportunity for us moving forward into the future in terms of next winter, whether we should do completely online or some mix of online and in person. And as well, we are always open to receiving ideas of new topics, new personalities, new experts who may very well be interested in presenting to our community. If you have comments on any of that, or things I haven't actually even mentioned, we really, really would appreciate if you would reach out to us at outreach@raccc.ca. And on that note, I think if we move to the next slide, I would like to say it's on with the show. And at this point, I'm going to pass the talking stick over to Paul. Paul, over to you to introduce your team.
And Steve, did you want to mention anything about the provincial stay-at-home order and its impact?
Oh, actually, that's it. That's a good point. Actually, thank you for that, Paul. So, everyone, what I would bring to your attention, and if it isn't on the website quite yet, it will be as of tomorrow morning. So, a provincial stay-at-home order was issued last week. And we had, as for those of you who are members, you would note that we had a temporary pause to provide time for us to have an executive meeting on Tuesday. Based on direction from Ottawa Public Health as well as the RA management, we will be having we will have a suspension of club-based in-person activities for the entirety of that stay-at-home order. The reason why I said in person is we will continue to be providing this virtual based seminar series. In addition, I would also like to take this opportunity to highlight on the 21st next week, we will be doing our annual open house, but it will be virtual. And I highly recommend that you take the opportunity to participate. I think we have a really vibrant and really interesting sort of approach we're trying to bring to the table. And the only thing I would request, again, reflecting this, is a bit of patience as we try to make our traditional open house, which really is about bringing community together to chat about and start that planning process for what we're going to do. And we're trying to translate all of that into a virtual based environment that ideally, hopefully, meets some of the expectations and the needs not only of our longstanding members, but also those people who are interested in just joining the club for the first time. So again, Paul, thank you for that note. Okay. I repass the talking stick back to you.
Good. Just in terms of introducing things, we have had 2 excellent presentations leading into this one. We had a presentation 2 weeks ago from Peter Kazrak going over some whitewater canoeing routes. And last week, day trips, an excellent presentation, to say the least, by Karen Hurd. And I'll be referencing some things from that presentation over the course of this evening. But what we have tonight are 4 presenters, including myself, who are experienced trip leaders and have been canoe tripping for a very long time. And tonight our focus is on weekend trip ideas, and that will be on getting there, the routes and the features of the areas to be visited. What we will do is have each person speaking for about 15 to 20 minutes, with then a short period for questions, followed by the next presentation, same rigmarole. And then finally, at the end of all of the presentations, there will also be an opportunity for questions and answers. So our first presenter is joining us by phone, and that's Xuan Shi. Now, hopefully I've got this coming up adequately for us. Here we go. Good. And just, come on. Yeah, so Schwinn has been a member of the club for about 12 years. He's participated on a number of weekend and long trips with the club. And he has particular knowledge, I've found, of the area of the Highway 60 corridor in Algonquin Park. So tonight, Schwinn will be presenting that. Those of you who have tripped with him know him well for his cooking, his gathering of firewood, and his substantial campfires. And on that note, I turn it over to Schwinn, and your presentation is showing.
Okay, thanks, Paul. We can go to the second page. Hi, everyone. My name is Xuan. I will talk about some canoe camping locations along the Highway 60 corridor of Algonquin Park. The one-way driving time to the access points along the corridor is about 3.5 to 4.5 hours. Basically, we take 417, then 17, and then 60 to the park. All the canoe routes I talk about today will be easy ones. For example, short or low portage with camping gear and limited paddling distance per day, and may stay on one campsite more than one night and have more time for activities such as paddling, swimming, hiking, etc. Of course, people are not limited to the routes I will talk about today. If for example, if people can prefer or can do more portages, they will certainly have more possibilities. Paul can go to the next page. So the next one I'll talk about the Guinieri Lake access point. The canoe launch is just outside of the east gate of Algonquin Park. Used to, like before last year, people would have to go to the east gate to buy the permit, then come back to the access point. I think starting from last year, people don't have to go to the east gate, can directly go to the parking lot and go from there. Generally speaking, the lake is a bit less busier than many other lakes along the Highway 60 corridor. I'm not sure why. Maybe because the parking lot is outside of the park. Perhaps some people didn't like that. I have started from that access point a number of times and never had any problems, so it seems fine. For a weekend trip, people can camp on Guinieri Lake all the time, so don't have to do portages. And for a regular weekend, with only one full day of paddling, people can easily just paddle on the lake. There more than enough routes to go. And even for a long weekend, I found out that for 2 full days paddling, people can find enough places to paddle on the lake. But if people prefer, they can go take that 100-meter portage to Rock Lake, which is just on the west of the Guinieri Lake. So only 100-meter portage without camping gear, it should be a pretty easy one. For a longer trip, people can go to Rock Lake on the west of Guinieri, and also can go to Pan Lake, which is on the south of Rock, and go to Clydesdale, which is on the south of Pan. Another option is go to Whitefish as well. Whitefish on the north of Rock. So, for example, for a longer trip, people can do Guinieri, Pan, and Clydesdale. If people stay one night at each lake and one night back, that will be 4 nights, 5-day trip. If stay two nights per lake, then 1 night back, that will be 7 nights. So it can be easily become a 5 to 8-day trip. We can go to the next page.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the Rock Lake access point. Rock Lake is just outside on the west of Guinieri, which is inside of the park. Generally, the Rock Lake access point is busier than Guinieri, and perhaps among the busiest along the corridor. I think probably because people can directly drive to the access point and can camp on Rock Lake. And Rock Lake is a relatively big lake. Even people have reservation, and it might be challenging to find a good campsite, say on a Friday afternoon. So if you want to start from Rock Lake, you might want to start as early as possible, or maybe possibly start from Thursday. For a weekend trip, people can camp on Rock or Whitefish and don't have to do portages. Whitefish has only 4 campsites, so may need to reserve pretty early. And for a weekend trip, people can paddle on Rock Lake or go south to Guinea. And another option is go to north to Whitefish and took a shorter portage to Lake of Two Rivers. So if you camp on Rock, you could easily have 2 days of paddling. Go south and go north. And also there are a few hikes people can do. There's a Booth Rock Trail accessible from Rock Lake. There's I think the distance is about 4 kilometers. And another hiking trail is the Centennial Ridge loop. I think it's a 10 kilometer loop, but people don't have to do the whole distance. There's a very nice lookout just not too far from the trailhead. Maybe 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers in that. And I think the Centennial Ridge is maybe more accessible if people camp on Whitefish. And for longer trips, people can go Rock Lake, go to Pan, go to Calgary, or could go to Whitefish and go to north to Whitefish and then come back to Rock and Pan and Calgary. There are many combinations. We can go to the next page, Paul. And the next one I'll talk about is the Cache Lake access point. Cache Lake access point, starting from Cache, there are no campsites on Cache Lake, but rather people need to camp on Tanamacon. Tanamacon is connected to Cache through a narrow channel. There are not too many campsites on Tanamacon. I think maybe 6 or 7. For a weekend trip, the more than enough to do. People can explore, have a paddling on Tanamacon and Cache, and also there's a hiking trail, Trakan and Tower Trail. There's a very nice lookout on the trail with a good view to Cache Lake. So people might can. I think there's if you look on the map, there's there's something called close to the dam. People can get on the trail just close to the dam on the portage trail. So, but for Cache Lake, it's probably not suitable for longer trips unless people would like to do a lot of portages because people have to do extensive portages to I think to be able to do for say 5 or 7 day trip. We can go to the next page. Next one is the Canoe Lake access point. Canoe Lake may be one of the busiest access points in Algonquin Park or Highway City corridor. There's a portage store at the access point, and people can rent canoes or kayaks there, and also can have meals there. And there are no campsites on Canoe Lake, but people have to go through a 295-meter portage to the north of Canoe Lake. That portage is quite easy. I think it's almost like a road, so quite flat and quite easy. After that, people can camp on the Joe Lake. There's I think 2 options. One is called the east arm of Joe Lake. I think it's in the west rapids of Joe Lake. We usually camp on the east arms of Joe Lake. And also possibilities, just for a weekend trip, people can, where they need a bit more, paddling, people can go to Thompson Lake, which is in the north of Joe Lake, or Little Doe Lake. And for longer trips, people can go to Burnt Island Lake, and even for from more, you can go to Little Otterside Lake or Otterside Lake. Burnt Island Lake is in the northeast of Jiu Lake, and the Otterside Lake is on the northeast of Burnt Island Lake. Once, I think we did an 8-day trip. We camped at Tom Thompson, and our next destination was Burnt Island Lake. If you look at the map, there are a few options. One obvious option is to take the 1,140 meter portage, then took another 200 meter portage from the Little Doe Lake to Burnt Island Lake. But we didn't do that. We instead we went to south of Tom Thompson, go back to the Jiu Lake, the east arm, then we go to Burnt Island Lake. By that way, on the map, you will see first portage is 165 meter, but actually that's not a portage. People can just keep going on the creek. I paddled through that portage a number of times. Never had to do it. People can just paddle through. So the first portage, 165, is actually not a portage. For the second one, the 435, people actually can keep paddling in the creek and reach the called the Lost Jiu Lake. That's a very small lake with only 2 campsites. And sometimes people may need to get out of the boat and walk in the creek, but it's durable. So by doing that, then when you reach the Lost Jiu Lake, you can get up on the shore and go back to the portage. By doing that, that 435 meter portage would become about 100 meter. Then the 200 meter portage left. So then, because we did that, we only did about 300 meter portage. So instead of 1,140 plus 200, that's about 1,340 meter. We did about only 300 meter portage. Obviously, but we paddled maybe 10 kilometers more. So that's kind of option available. Like, I mean, obviously, if people good at doing portages, they don't have to do that. I just want to mention that it's a possibility. And after people finish the canoeing, they can have a hike on the highway, Hardwood Lookout Trail. It has a very nice view to Smoke Lake, and the trailhead is right next to the access point. Paul can go to the next page. Next is I will talk about the Smoke Lake access point. Smoke Lake access point is actually just on the south of Canoe Lake access point. Sometimes I saw people, doing portages from canoe to smoke or from smoke to canoe, just cross over the road. There are no campsites on Smoke Lake, but people need to take a 200 meter portage from Smoke Lake to Rocked Lake. Waves on smoke can be strong when the wind is strong, so people may need to be prepared for that. For a weekend trip, people can stay on Rock Lake. The lake itself is pretty big, and if you look at the map, there's on the west of the lake, there's something called Parkside Bay. Actually, it's the same lake, but even from Parkside Bay to paddle to, say, for example, to the main part of the lake, it can take a while. So they're more than enough to paddle for a weekend trip. Or if people prefer, they can take that 590 meter portage to Big Porcupine Lake. I found that the portage wasn't that challenging. I mean, it's pretty easy, and so even for a long weekend trip, people would have almost like 2 days of paddling available. And for weekend trips, I mean, for longer trips, longer than weekend, people can keep going to the south of Porcupine and go to, say, Bonachere. And also same, people can have a hike on the Hardwood Lookout Trail and before or after the canoeing. I believe it's the last page. Anyone has some questions?
Mark, do we have any questions?
So there's one question from the chat, and Gail would like to know if the slides are going to be available afterwards. I've responded that eventually we're going to have the presentation available on YouTube, but The question, I guess, for the group is, how do you feel about putting the slideshow or making the slideshow available on the club website?
I have no objections for mine.
Yeah, mine's fine.
So in answer to everybody who's listening then, we'll look into it and we'll see what we can do. Schwan, one of the questions here is, how's the fishing?
The only thing I remember, like very good was once we did the mainland weekend trip. I talked about the lake that's called the Lost Joe Lake, right? Starting from a canoe lake. I talk about the one we from Joe Lake to Lost Joe Lake. People may need to walk on the creek. Just inside of the creek, once we saw lots of fish in the mainland weekend trip. Literally, not hundreds of. Maybe I think that time the fish were spawning in that place. So I would say that that's a Lost Joe Lake with 2 campsites. Maybe a very, very nice fishing location. Even though I haven't done fishing there, but I saw lots of fish, bigger ones.
Another question, what maps are you using for the slides?
I used to you just search on its official map. It's online version. It's kind of like the big one. I just cut part of it. It's an official map, yeah.
So it's the official
from I think.
It's the official
from
Algonquin Park.
Yes, from the I think the official park website, yeah.
Another question is, are there portages to any of the destinations? I think, if I recall correctly, the portages to all of them. It's just a matter of how long.
For all the trips I talked about today, like most of the portages, would be in the 300 meter to 500 meter portage in that range. Rarely would reach 800, but everyone will be less than 1 kilometer. I mean, I wouldn't do anything more than 1 kilometer, and most of like portages I do probably will be less than 500. But obviously people can have options. They can if they want to do more portages, they're waiting. They're okay to do more portages. There will be kind of more possibilities, more combinations of routes available, right?
And I'm not seeing any more questions.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing this screen and invite John to share his screen while I introduce him. John Galbraith has been a member of this club and its predecessor for 38 years. And he's been leading trips for just about that long. I think, John, you said it's at least 35 years. He's also a past president of the Y Canoe Camping Club back in both 2004 and 2005. And he's led a number of trips into La Vérendrye. As you can see with John's tie, and a couple of days ago, he was on a dry run with a very loud yellow jacket. John likes to have fun on his trips and ensure that others enjoy themselves. So on that, John, I'll ask you to take it away and bring up your presentation if you can.
Okay, can you see my presentation full screen there? Okay, assume everybody can see it.
Is everybody seeing it? Because I'm not seeing it.
No, it's not up.
We're seeing his face.
You need to share your screen and then bring it up.
Okay.
There
There we
you go.
go.
Okay. Okay, we should have that full screen now.
We do.
You do, good. Okay, excellent. Yeah, so I've been going there for about 38 years. I got a late start in life. I didn't start canoeing until I was 27. That's what I looked like when I joined the club, and that's the grumpy old man that I am now. Where is La Vérendrye Park? We call it La Vérendrye Park. It's a wildlife refuge or reserve fund. It's a protected area. It's gone under various jurisdictions. It's a nice drive there by car. You can actually get there by bus even if you want. Rental facilities are available at an outfitter. And you can camp when you arrive at the registration point, which is called Le Domaine. So yeah, it's exactly 241 kilometers from the canoe shed. Pretty easy. Go over the King Edward Bridge, take the outer route 5 and 105 till you can't go any further, take a left, go about, actually it's about another 55 kilometers. And you must go to a place called Le Domaine. There's not much there, so your last chance really is at Maniwaki. If you've forgotten anything to pick up supplies. So the park opens for canoeing on Victoria Day weekend and runs through Labor Day. After that, you're not allowed to canoe in the park, and it's available to hunters with permits. Sometimes they'll extend a couple of canoe routes past Labor Day for a couple of weeks. This particular picture here with the ice in it is a couple of years ago. The ice was on the lake until Thursday of Victoria Day weekend. And like magic, it disappeared around 11 a.m. on Friday of Labor Day. And we were the only people in the park. And you needed icebreaker canoes. Actually, there were only a few patches of floating ice, so it wasn't bad, but we were in snow up to our knees on Victoria Day weekend on the portages. So the park is the headwaters of the Ottawa River. It features large lakes with islands. Think of Lake Opeongo in Algonquin Park, and that's your typical lake in La Vérendrye Park. So large lakes, when you get strong winds over a long pitch like that, you can get some rough seas. So that it can be a drawback. You could get windbound. The consistency of portages and campsites vary considerably. You can tell the park is not as heavily used and not as well maintained as Algonquin Park. It's a multi-use park, so you may see motorboats and fishermen, but not many. And the density of use is very low, much lower than Algonquin Park or any of the areas I know of in Ontario. So you are very much have a feeling of being in the wilderness. So yeah, I started in the club around 1982. And here are some of the key figures that I met when I joined the club. Paul Laguerre led many of the trips, and La Vérendrye was one of his favorite spots. And I didn't know if I was going to make it in the club because Paul Laguerre was like a drill sergeant. You had to be up early in the morning, you had to work hard, you had to paddle hard on the portages, and but I made it. I made it through boot camp, and here I am. He inspired me to do solo trips in La Vérendrye because one of his things, there's Paul, one of his things was doing a solo week-long trip every year with his 80-pound Grumman canoe in La Vérendrye Park. Jim White and I met in the club around the same time, and we were novices, and Jim went on to be whitewater coordinator for a number of years. And Jim and I, we trained ourselves on map and compass. We got lost in La Vérendrye Park, and yeah, we pulled out the directions for a compass, and for a long time, we taught ourselves map and compass. This fellow, John Allen, led a lot of trips. Helmut Alexander, I met shortly after joining the club, and he's still with the club. Okay, how do you plan a trip to La Vérendrye Park? Well, online, back in the 80s, we didn't have this. If you go to Canoe Camping, spelt in French, canoe/camping.ca, you can get a wealth of information about the park. The registration office doesn't open till Victoria Day. There is a phone number you can call where you'll get a Montreal office that just simply says the park is not open and we don't know anything. But you know, before the office opens, use your topographic maps, Google Earth, and the website, and you can see various possibilities. So your first stop after you've planned your trip is at Le Domaine. You must check in there. There's the registration office, and you may camp there the first night. If the registration office is closed, you just camp in a big field adjacent to Lac Jean Perret in front of the office. Go in the morning, get your permit. There used to be a restaurant at Le Domaine. And those of you who remember that, I'm afraid it's gone. As I mentioned, you'll purchase your permit at Le Domaine. Your permit's for a specific route. You cannot reserve campsites. In fact, you can't even reserve a route or your place in the park. You have to drive there. It's the old-fashioned way. You get a paper permit and tell them you're there, and off you go. Only once was I told that my access point and the route I'd chosen was too busy, and then they'll recommend another route. The staff are reasonably experienced, and some of them have done some of the routes, and they can recommend things to look for on your trip. So they are, as well as issuing permits, a good source of information. So when you go on this website that I was talking about, here's some of the stuff you see. In the old days, we just looked at a topo map and said, it looks like this lake connects to that lake and so on, and chose our own routes. Now they have specified routes, and you get your permit for a specific route. They want you to travel. It's not really a place where you go and set up camp for the weekend. So if you'll get a permit, for example, Route 15, it's 3 days. You'll say you're out for 3 days, you're doing Circuit 15, and you'll get your permit. This is Circuit 15. It's one of my favorites. And the put-in point there is right at Le Domaine. You'll do this in a counterclockwise direction and through some big water. The size of these lakes is deceptive. Remember, each one of these squares is 1 square kilometer. This is a topographic map at a beautiful, beautiful scenic river, Rivière de Rapide. And here it is on the Canada Maps app, which is an app that I really like. You can download it ahead of time, then you don't need cellular service, and you can actually use it as a GPS and track your route. Although I would never go anywhere without a paper map and a compass in La Vérendrye Park. The navigation is challenging. You should buy a circuit map at the main registration for about $10 or so. And here's Circuit 15 shown on the circuit map. The advantage of this map is it shows where the campsites are and how big the campsites are. For example, here, you see, this is a campsite, 15-62. They're all numbered, and it has 4 tent pads.
Hello, it's Steve.
Hey, Steven, how's it going? Yeah, my brother told me that you called today.
Well, I want to provide a bit of follow-up information.
Okay, am I still live?
Yeah, you're still live. Steve, if you can mute. Yeah.
Okay, so
Already done.
okay, so there's a pop out here of a challenging part of the route. This is where you'll run into rapids. there's an easy portage to get around them. A couple of portages. This route has about 47 kilometers of flatwater paddling. So you're probably going to be taking a flatwater canoe, quite likely an ultralight. But the temptation to run these rapids is, I've run it quite a few times in an ultralight, but you've got to calculate the risk involved here. You can get through the first rapid here fairly easily. Anybody could probably do that. But when you get to the second one here, which comes up very quickly, you better know your prize and draws, and you better be able to do a back ferry. If you don't do a back ferry, you just can't get around the ledge. So easy for a whitewater paddler, but no margin for error. You're out in the wilderness and you've got an ultralight canoe, most likely. Some people will take whitewater canoes so that they don't have that risk here. When I lead club trips, most of the time, based on my group, I'll just take the portage. This here, a BC, it means the park, these lakes were made before Christ. No, actually BC is French for barrage de Castor. At the end of Rivière de Rapide on this circuit 15, the river washes out into Lac Jean Perret. There's no portage here. You've got to just ride it out and just make sure your group knows how to brace. The other route that I really like is some distance from Le Domaine. You can camp at Le Domaine and go down the highway, and here's the description. Where to get it from Highway 117. You take it to a logging road. So you go up the highway, and then you're go down the logging road, and your put in point is there. One thing I like to do often is look at Google Earth before I go on a trip. It kind of shows roads and features that you are useful to know. And Google Earth, we didn't have that in the old days. So here it is. Here's the park map. So you can put in here, but I prefer to put in here. I feel the car is a little safer. Parked down there near a fisherman's campsite. And you'll go around like this. There's some nice meandering streams and creeks and so on you go through. But these lakes are big enough to get windbound on. Lac Nizard, if the wind is coming from the southwest, could put you in trouble. I think I mentioned the campsites, very inconsistency. They're all spaced well apart. I'm talking in general now about La Vérendrye Park. Circuits near Le Domaine and the more used part of the park are well maintained. Some even have a picnic table. They usually have a fire grill. In the more remote circuits, less often used, sometimes the portages aren't signed, so you better have a good map. Sometimes the campsites are not exactly where they're indicated, so it's a little bit more of a rustic experience. That's what your campsite signs look like there. La Vérendrye Park, one of the things I love about it is deadwood is abundantly available. Unlike La Vérendrye Park, I worked for a few summers a few years ago as a guide in Algonquin Park, and it was a real challenge finding firewood, and I felt I had to make a fire for my guests, because if I didn't, well, I wouldn't get a tip at the end of the trip. Anyway, the beauty of La Vérendrye Park, easy to make a cooking fire. In the old days, the canoe shed was full of equipment like this. And it really was a canoe camping club. We if we had to, we could build a log cabin. So, yeah, I like to cook over fire. I prefer the snap, crackle, pop of a fire and the solitude it brings as compared to one of the more noisy modern day jet engine stoves. This is one of my favorite campsites. And I know this pair of loons. These are the kinds of views you can get. And there's no can or bottle ban in La Vérendrye Park. In fact, they used to have a display that showed you how to crush cans, encouraging you to take the cans out and the bottles out. So, but you know, if you're doing a fast-paced trip with portages, well, you know, I can show you one of my favorite recipes, right? It's very easy to make. There it is there. You just add La Vérendrye, unfiltered La Vérendrye water, and oh man, it's awesome. And you know, instead of a bottle of wine, I can show you how to make a very good Quebec wine from grape crystals, dehydrated alcohol. Yeah, it's the best wine you can get. Very easy to portage. With any trip, you got to look at safety, especially if you're the trip leader. Now, the park reception doesn't give you a warm, fuzzy feeling that they're looking after you. They'll tell you that they're not responsible for your safety. Let someone back home know when you'll be back, and then they should be instructed to call 911 if you don't return. You know, call them, don't call us. Have a good trip, and you won't see any park wardens out there. I've never been asked for my permit, you know, in 40 years. And so you're very much on your own. I like to get a weather forecast before I go out because in this particular situation, 16-kilometer-an-hour winds, direction coming from the east, I'm going to be okay. Solo, 25-kilometer-an-hour winds, or a group that's not experienced, yeah, might need to modify your route. Because of the large lakes, once again, you can't get away with the same sorts of winds that you could in smaller lakes of Algonquin Park. I always like to look at egress points. I examine Google Earth. This is Rivière de Rapide, where sometimes I run the rapids. And what if you feel like you're in the total wilderness and the park map doesn't show you how to get out, but look at Google Earth. Hey, here's a possible egress point. So they will sell you mandatory evacuation insurance. In this particular picture, the helicopter here is simply delivering a pizza for Uber Eats, but as you can see, it's not a large helicopter. You'll be leaving all your gear behind if you're evacuated. Cellular reception is spotty, so how are you going to call them? You know, maybe give your guardian angel these numbers. Other options are available. Sometimes, some years they'll you can rent a sat phone at Le Domaine reception. So in a whirlwind, that's a synopsis of La Vérendrye Park. I'm ready to take questions, and if I can't get to all the questions, or you think of something afterwards, by all means, feel free to contact me either by phone or by email. And if I don't get back to you right away, well, I probably went missing in La Vérendrye Park.
Thanks very much, John. That was great. I had a couple of questions. One, what is the app that you're using for your maps?
Okay. I mean, I take a GPS with me, but I'm just looking at my cell phone now. There's a Canada Apps map. I'll just get you the exact name here. Canada. Just says Canada. Canada Maps. Go to your app store, put in map Canada, and it's topographic maps.
There was another issue. Judith Fecto, if you wanted to unmute to ask, you referenced the CIPAC, and I was wondering in your chat whether you had something else to add there.
There's just a spelling mistake for the CIPAC on one of the slides. If people want to refer to the website for CIPAC, it's spelled S-E-P-A-C and not P-E-C.
Okay.
That's just a detail. And perhaps CIPAC is the Société des Établissements. I can't remember the whole thing, but it's an acronym for Ontario Parks and Reserves. Also, exactly. Thank you for.
Mark has just posted it in the chat. So.
Yeah, that's where you'll get your permit. I always get it mixed up with the SAQ, but yeah.
Both are very useful.
Interesting too is contrary to Ontario rules, if you wish to fish in the CIPAC network, you need extra permit over and above your provincial permit to fish in there. Just so you know.
And they are mean. I got caught once without the proper permits, and it wasn't nice. But it's a rather amusing story. I'll tell it sometime.
I think, John, that's it for the questions for now. If you can unshare your screen, I'll then do the introduction for Catherine. And you should have a red button.
Stop sharing. I can do that. Okay.
Sure. And Catherine, if you want to start bringing yours up, that would be great. Catherine Hall is a member of the club. She's been a member for about 3 years. She's also a valued member of the Flatwater Committee. She's been doing trips for over 30 years and leading trips with the club for 2 years. And she's been visiting North Frontenac for decades. Catherine is known for her traditional camping skills and traveling with her 2 very fit dogs. So on that, Catherine, I'll pass it on to you and take it away.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay? I hope. So as Paul mentioned, I've been camping in this area for a very long time. I'm going on my 3rd decade. And, you know, people can do this area as day trips. I know that Karen Hurd talked about it last week, just because it's so convenient in many, many, many ways. It is definitely for novices. It's open to novices, but you can go as an experienced person to just relax and enjoy. It is it's a very well managed website. It's a very well managed area. They do try and keep up with it. Last summer, they were pretty overwhelmed, but they still managed to keep up with it. So there's a couple of things that I really like about this area, but one of them is that you book a specific site. You book a specific campsite. So if you want to arrange it, but it means that you aren't looking for campsites. You know exactly what to expect. If there are campsites that you like, you can look for those specifically. And you don't spend a lot of time wandering. So it makes it pretty manageable when you're coming in, you know, after work on in an evening. The route, it's not far from Ottawa, depending on which route you're going, which lake you're going to, but it's at most 2 hours, give or take, if you're doing the, you know, up to Schooner or one of the longer gravel roads trip. The area is north of Charlotte Lake and south of Calabogie. And when you go to the bookings, you can do it by lake or date, depends on what you think. I'm going to show you, which is one of the reasons why you see my whole screen, is so that I can show you some of the stuff. I have loaded up the park, the camp. So this is the website So North Frontenac Parklands, all right, they have policies. This is the campsite booking by map area. And I just wanted to sort of demonstrate the ease of which, okay, we'll talk a bit more about the different lakes and what their availability and what they're like. But you can be either specific on the lake that you want to go to, knowing it, preferring it. You can go in looking for specific dates. There's a lot of functionality here. What I did was I just did, knowing how busy and how hard it is to book things these days. I just threw in a weekend and said, give me everything that's available. And I just did that, 2 hours ago. And believe it or not, there are actually some sites still available. So it gives you an idea of how manageable it is. Now, there's nothing to say about those sites, but this is an example of what it's like. Boat access only, mainly a rugged site, room enough to 1 to 2, fire pit, boat, and pretty. Okay, so it gives you what's available. If you have a particular preference on sites, you can see if you're open to more of your dates, you can do it without the dates. Okay, so there's a lot of option on how to book. The other thing about it is that here I'm looking just at Google Maps to give you an idea. All right. So these are many of the lakes. So this one up here is Round Schooner, Long Schooner. This one is Crotch. There's Kashwakamak, and Big Gull. So these are the ones that correspond. There's the smaller lakes that are further up here. Okay. And I'll just show you this. I just like to give people a really good understanding of how some of these sites work. So these lakes, so these are the bigger lakes down here that I was talking to, Big Gull and Crotch Lake. The smaller ones, the mediocre ones, the tiny ones. So these ones are pretty small. You can get a sense of them, okay? The boat launches and everything else, all right? So there's a lot of information on these sites. The thing I like about these sites is that you can have a visual without having been to it. Knowing, whether or not it's a point or which direction it is, you can be pretty accurate on what you're going to have, right? Room enough for 1 tent. You're not going to get anybody else on that. I have managed sometimes to get, 3 tents on a 2 tent site, but that's pretty rough. And almost all of the sites have some sort of, counter, if you will, sort of like a kitchen counter, privy and fire pit. There for your use. And unless it's a group site, which are pretty much closed off to the public right now, the firewood is available. So it may not be as good as La Vérendrye, but it's definitely substantially better than Algonquin. If you're camping on one of the islands, oftentimes you end up having to go back to the mainland to get it, to find your wood. But so just that sort of ease of booking and everything else makes it a really nice, easy getaway for a weekend. There are 11 lakes in all that are available for booking. And as I've mentioned, there are 2 of the larger ones are Big Gull and Crotch. They're quite different. Then you go down Kashwakamak, and we'll go through more of these. I'm talking a little bit about them, but they range from the much larger, not quite like Opiongo, but still pretty big. So as you saw, this is what I was showing you before, just sort of gives you an idea of the way that the map works, zooming in, zooming out, talking about the availability. When you open up a site, you can open up the availability and it'll show you. Let me just give you an example. Go back to the screen. And it opens up and it tells you when that site is available and when it's not. I did this again, right? Okay. Yeah, all right. Check availability, selected dates. And I haven't selected any dates, so, all right. Gives you an idea. So I have been in the area, like I say, for 30 odd years now. And it's changed a lot over the years, but it is definitely quite well managed. Big Gull Lake is probably the largest in a way. It runs east-west, so you get a lot of winds that pick up pretty rapidly. Sometimes the storms might pass you by, sometimes you get caught in them. There are quite a few cottages on the lake, but because of the size of it, there are definitely motorboats around. And, you know, it's definitely a consideration. It's not an easy paddle if you're going to try and run up. The access is from the two put-ins, really. They're public docks and areas, one at the west end, one at the east end. So that being said, there are quite a few islands available as well. Now, Big Gull has quite a few cottages on it, but Crotch does not. Crotch has very few. If they are, they've been grandfathered. It is almost completely crown land, where except for the marina at the bottom. It's actually a fishing lodge, not just a marina, really. So, you know, there are considerations on this sort of stuff. Crotch is big, but it runs north-south more so. There is a tiny little area at the very, let me just show you. I'm going to zoom in on this. So this is the Google Maps rather than the site. When you come into Crotch, there's this little passageway that connects the south part of the lake with the north part. And I find that the south part has more motorboats than the north. And you can come in from the north on the road, and we'll talk a little bit more about the routes into the area. So it gives you an idea. But I've camped right here on this point, and it gets pretty busy because there's a lot of traffic coming through when motorboats come in to and fro, and people paddling back in the wee hours of the morning. So, but there's some gorgeous sights, as this photo will tell you. That was from last summer. There is one loop that can be done. Paul has done it. I have not. I tend to go to this area for complete unwind. And it basically is the Kashawakamak, Big Gull, and Crotch Lake loop. Pretty good paddling. Definitely some of the bigger lakes. Kashawakamak is not as big as the other two, and it's a bit quieter, but it's consideration. So Kashawakamak is, once again, it runs parallel kind of with Big Gull Lake. So it runs northwest, but there's a lot more access points. But like Big Gull, it has quite a few cottages on it. But it's a smaller lake, and it's, as a result, it's much quieter. You know, I still see things like the eagles are still around and that sort of stuff. It's a very nice lake, given that it has quite a few cottages on it. So yeah, that's one of those nice lakes. Anyways, Schooner, and I'm going to refer to Schooner as just one lake, but really it's two, Round Schooner and Long Schooner. The put-in is at the bottom of, the main put-in, I should say, is at the bottom end of Long Schooner, but there is also a route coming in from the north on Round Schooner. And Schooner has no cottages, none. But it has really good fishing, so you do get motorboats coming in to go fishing. And one of the things to think about is that whatever the weather is on one of them, it is the opposite weather in general on this other. I'm going to show you in here. So let's go zoom out and zoom into. So this is the main put-in on Schooner. You come through, and then here is Round Schooner. Now it's not really round, but and I will say that when you come in, it's often hard to see this passageway until you're right upon it. I've done it in the wee hours of the night or in the evening, and you're going by moonlight. You can still find it. It's quite a fun little passageway because with my kids, we've gone through, you know, pulling our paddles out of the water because of the snapping turtles. You can make lots of echoing sounds because of the cliffs on one side. There's some good hiking up here. There's some rocks that you can jump off, that sort of stuff. There's an ATV trail that comes in from the north, which is another access point. Not as popular, obviously, not as main as the the boat put in there. This trail, this path here, this route will take you up to Centennial Lake. It's kind of a fun route. Paul and I did it last year. And you know when you get to Centennial Lake because it's big and open. So yeah, so just to keep that in mind. And so the other lakes are range from small to very small. The one thing I will say is that the road is quite rough on those on the smaller lakes up into the bit. So keep that in mind. I have driven on most of these roads with my old Prelude. So if you know anything about a Prelude, it's basically a sports car, and it's quite manageable, surprisingly. I know some people have a harder time with it, but the easiest one is the South put in on Crotch Lake. That one's basically a 1 kilometer dirt road that's very, very heavily used. I don't think I have too many more to say. If you are coming in, I say that the drive is about an hour to 2 hours. If you're coming from Ottawa, a lot of people take the easy route and take Highway 7 and cut up into the up. But it's actually, that's a longer route unless you're coming into the south end of Crotch. If you can, it's a lot more fun to come in from this route, coming up through the 16. There's a couple of 2 different routes options, but they take you on fun, well-paved, surprisingly well-paved mostly, roads that kind of windy and you know, things. This route takes you via Almont through and down. So it's a lot more fun. But whatever you do, if you're going up to Schooner, it's a good half-hour drive. The one thing about this area is that there are no portages unless you're doing that loop. So it makes it, like I say, it's a novice area because you just pack up your canoes and you go. I like to float my canoes for food rather than hanging. Makes it easy for me. As Paul mentioned, I always have dogs, so I don't have the same issue with critters around. But don't think I have any more things to say. Parking, usually get when you book online, they give you 1 free parking spot. So if you need more parking, you have to pay for it. You pay by a week, and so it's very straightforward. I've had to change my plans. If you can, they will let you do it totally. You just email them, and they're great. So yeah, that's about it. Any questions?
I'm not currently seeing any questions in the chat room. Was there anyone who had a question and wanted to ask? If you want to unmute.
Oh, thanks. Feel free to ask me if you any ticks. Well, you know what? I've got dogs. I always assume they're ticks. You know, there are ticks in the field where I walk my dogs in the city. So at this point, I just assume that there are. I haven't directly had any problems. Do I have an email? Sorry, I missed a lot of part of that question. Oops.
Sorry, do you have an email to share for questions at a later date?
Sure. My email address is on the website, on the Canoe Club website, Catherine@maniacoru.com. Just you can go ahead and look me up. I didn't.
Another question is, what did you mean by paying by week? Can you pay?
Oh, so basically, if you book for a weekend, they give you 1 free parking pass, and you can park where close you're put in. They give you ideas. But if you have 2 people for 2 cars, for example, you would have to pay for a second car permit. A road permit, and they only sell the road permits either by day or by week. So that's what I was referring to.
Okay. You, Andrew, I think is having trouble finding campsite availability when he's looking at the website, but perhaps we can take that offline.
Right. So yeah, it's late in the season, and I know that they were amazingly booked last year. They usually run at 40-50% during weekdays, and last year they were at 80% bookings for the weekdays. So, but like I said, if you do all lakes for your weekends, roughly, it can give you an idea of where you might have some opportunity. Definitely will be smaller campsites at this point in time, though.
And then Judy is asking, how accurate are the number of campsites that are listed?
100%.
100%, okay. And then
And their locations are pretty much 100% too.
Steve is saying Public Health Ontario has a set of maps on red deer tick distribution. And then a question on, do you like Red Horse Lake as a small lake?
Let me see which one. I've only done 2 of these ones up here. I'm going to do another one. Oh, I remember that one. There was a fire one year. I went with my kids. We went for the August long weekend, one of my favorite weekends to go. It was nice. There were a couple of cottages. There were eagles. I remember watching. There were like 3 eagles. It was pretty impressive given the situation, given the size of it. And the area up in here was quite swampy almost in a sense, but it allowed for a lot of animals and birds and that sort of stuff. So yeah, it wasn't bad. It was quite nice. That's the thing, right? They may be small, but if you're going for a weekend, for a relaxing weekend, you know, you don't, it's nice to be able to watch and look around and that sort of stuff.
Samina wanted to clarify that all the lakes are noted without portages?
Correct.
Okay. That's a nice thing.
It makes it really easy. Trust me. I started off coming up to this area when before I had dogs even. But once I started having dogs, we used to pull a dinghy because we were afraid the dogs would tip the canoe. I've since learned how to deal with that, but that's just something to give you an idea of the things that I've done.
Okay, I think that's it for the questions.
Okay.
Something about favorite with the dogs, but if you could unshare your screen, Catherine, I'll do a short introduction of myself. Hopefully bring up my own presentation here. Let's stop share. Wouldn't you know I'm the one who has the problem? Here we go. What's going on? I need to get rid of that presentation first. Here we go. Now we're back. Sorry, just I hope everybody can now see the screen. So I've been a member of the Canoe Club for, I think, 23 years. I've been Flatwater coordinator in 2003, 2004, last year and this year. And I've led, as many of you I've seen on this call, a number of club day, weekend, and long trips over the years. I think I've led Booth Lake probably about 15 times, because if it's Labor Day weekend, chances are I'm leading Booth Lake. And Barron Canyon, I've done more as a day trip, and I'll describe that a little later. What you have here, by the way, is the put-in when you're going to Booth Lake at the Shell Lake Gate. So it's a very easy spot to get into. But I'll start with Acray Barron Canyon as an overview. It's about a 3-hour drive from Ottawa. It's quite popular, so you want to reserve early. I did look at the site a couple of days ago, and there is some availability. For example, Labor Day weekend. It's really a 3-day trip. You could push it hard and do it in 2, but it's more of a 3-day trip. And it's very much a summer trip with swimming and scenic opportunity. In terms of skills, I see it as novice to intermediate, and the intermediate is merely because of wind on Grand Lake just as you're starting out, and maybe some wind on Stratton Lake in areas. In terms of portaging, There are 9 portages on this route. They tend to be short to medium. I think the longest is 730 meters, and there's no whitewater really to speak of on this trip. To describe the driving, basically you're taking Highway 417 and 17 all the way through Pembroke. At Highway 41, this is where the Irving Big Stop is, so it's a common spot to stop, but basically you're going 12 kilometers north of there, turning to the left when you have a Petawawa sign, and I think there's now a traffic light there, and about 300 meters later, you're turning to the right, and you go all the way into the park. So it's, I'm not saying it's goof proof, but it's pretty close to that as a way to get into the park. You check in at the gate at the park entrance, and then you're heading all the way in here. And this is better described. I've taken this from Kevin Callan's book, Up the Creek, by the way, which is a good source for this. I find this map easier to follow than the Algonquin Park map. But basically, shortly after you check in at the gate, you want to have a car here at the finish, which is called Squirrel Rapids. Whether you're doing that as a shuttle from this point A to point F, or you happen to have a car immediately available, good for you. You're driving up through here. One thing to note is the Barron Canyon Trail. So there's a trail I'll be talking about a little later at the top of the canyon, which is a must do if you haven't been there before. Another thing worth noting is last week, Karen Hurd was referring to a trip in Barron Canyon where you basically start at Squirrel Rapids, go up, and then come right back down. Another way of doing the day trip is to put in here at the Brigham Lake parking lot, portage down 200 meters and come through in this way. But for my purpose, sorry, I'm talking about the paddling route, which is a put in here at Acre. It's possible to camp at the campground or to drive there from Ottawa. Put in here, you're going down Grand Lake to the south, swinging into a more narrow channel, doing about the easiest portage you'll ever find, and then doing about 6 kilometers down Stratton Lake. And the first night you either want to be camping on Stratton or St. Andrews, because right in here is the natural water slide, and a little bit further down is High Falls, which are very much worth the effort to go see. On your next day, there's the portage from St. Andrews into High Falls, and it has a very steep lead into the put-in, something to watch for. Then another couple of kilometers and a portage of 300 meters into Ooze Lake. And Ooze is extremely well named because you're paddling through black goop. Obvious reason why there's no campsite on Ooze Lake. Then there's a portage of 640 meters into Opalescent. This is quite a popular lake and features a campsite right here that's called Flintstone Park. And the reason that it's known by that name is there are a whole pile of rock slabs that people have rearranged into furniture. And I understand that Catherine's even responsible for some of that. So this is a good lake to camp on if you can get it, and it's difficult to get right now. You then have a portage of 730 meters the next day, very short paddle across Brigham Pond, really, it's not much of a lake, and then a portage of 100 meters, cross another pond, and then there's Brigham Chute, and you'll see a picture shortly of that. It's a beautiful spot, a great spot for a lunch, but not to camp. And then you're going through the canyon for about 7 kilometers, a portage of 420 meters, and then another kilometer to the finish. And this is a very popular route. I mentioned the Barron Canyon Trail. About 10 minutes into this trail, you're going to be climbing, well, 2 minutes into the trail, but over the course of 10 minutes, you're going to get to this point Very popular picture taking spot. This is a group from the club from a few years ago. Some of you may recognize yourselves in the picture. And if you climb a little bit further, you get this. You'll notice no guardrails, and it's a 300-foot drop. So I would highly recommend that you watch your step. The natural water slide at the end of Stratton Lake, the right time of the season, is a lot of fun. Bring your PFD, you slide down, and then you get sucked under the water and then popped right back out again. So worth the fun, and then go about, I'm gonna say 200 meters down a trail on what I'll call River Left, and you get to High Falls, which you can get down here. After all, I did this a number of years ago, that's me. But watch your step again. It's a fairly steep trail down to this location. Okay, I mentioned Brigham Chute. There is a fantastic little lunch spot right here, whether you're doing it as a day trip or a 3-day trip. It's pretty much a must stop. The thing I would say though is if you're here in early May, this is like Niagara Falls. If you're here in September, you can literally walk across. Then you come to the Barron Canyon after you've done that portage around Brigham Chute. Thank you, Karen Hurd, for supplying me this picture. This is Mark Scott. And going through the canyon is gorgeous. There's multicolored rocks, purple, green, brown, as you go through the canyon for, I'm going to say, about 2 kilometers. And one thing that's worth seeing, by the way, is there is a bit of a hidden waterfall there. And back in 2002, I can remember we were paddling on Canada Day. It was about 35 degrees Celsius, and the group desperately wanted to cool off. So what did we do? We came into the waterfall, we all sat there, and this fella, Ken McNair, had a timer on his camera to take the picture. So that was a lot of fun. Great day. I'm going to move now to Booth Lake, which is one of my favorite locations. And it's about a 3.5-hour drive from Ottawa. It's fairly popular. There's still some availability when I checked a couple of days ago. It's possible to do this as a 2-day trip because really it's only about 8 kilometers there and 8 kilometers back. You can get there in 2.5 hours from the put-in. But I recommend it as a 3 or more day trip. You can do it in spring and go see the moose, but you'll have about 3 million black flies to join you in your trek. And in the summer, swimming, hiking, fishing, as well as the fishing and the hiking in the fall. Sorry. The skills, I would say a little bit better than novice. There can be wind on Farm Lake, which we'll see shortly, as well as Booth Lake. And there's only 2 portages each way going in, 90 meters and 550 meters. And I recommend it as a base camp trip. So how do you get there? Coming out of Ottawa, you go to Renfrew, turn on to Highway 60, and you come through like Golden Lake, Villeneuve, Barry's Bay, and beyond Barry's Bay, you're approaching the village of Madawaska. You go over a bridge, drive about 200 meters, hang a right, and then it's 25K all the way to the Shell Lake put-in. To describe the route is pretty easy. You're putting in here at Shell Lake, coming through a windy section of the Opiongo River, cross Farm Lake, back into the Opiongo River, and then there's this 90-meter portage. But those of us who are more adventurous, we actually walk up this area. If you don't mind getting your legs wet up to your knees, or depending upon your height, up to your thighs, going through there. Go across Kitty Lake into a more narrow section of river, and then there's the portage into Booth Lake. One thing to note that is very special about Booth Lake is all along here, these are beach campsites. So they are, you know, popular, but still very available. Another thing to note is this is McCarthy Creek, which is an interesting paddle that I will refer to later. And another opportunity on a day trip when you're going from your base camp is to do Mole Lake, a very steep portage into Gada Lake, and then into Rumley, which is unfortunately full of leeches, then into Ryegrass and back to Booth. But that has 3 kilometers of portaging to it, so I'm not sure how popular that would be. One of the great things that people seem to like to do at Booth Lake is just to go there to relax, and that it's a great location for doing that. You have the swimming. Somebody on this call may be actually there, and I thank Don Haynes for the photograph here on that one. The other opportunity, I mentioned McCarthy Creek. Sorry, that should be zipped up. And Kristen, you'll probably recognize yourself. I see you're on the call. Finally, in terms of opportunities, there are great hiking opportunities if you have a day with fairly high winds or you don't want to be on the water. So for example, this portage is interesting. It has an abandoned shack somewhere along the way. But what is even more interesting is there is a logging road along here. It passes immediately to the south of Mykiss Lake, but it hooks up into this portage and you can walk all the way, to the dam at Annie's Bay on Opiongo Lake. So from this point to there is about an hour and a half each way. And what you can see, this is the group from last year. We paddled to the 600-meter portage and then walked, left our canoes there. It is not a busy location. And the trail was absolutely stunning. Tons of mushrooms of all kinds of varieties. So something worth doing. I think the group quite enjoyed it. The other thing I wanted to just cover before I open things for questions is this year is particularly demanding in certain areas. Trying to get a reservation in Killarney is basically the definition of impossible. But there are a number of other areas that may be of interest to you. For example, the north end of Algonquin Park, and I think Glenn Barber, who's on our executive, has a couple of trips posted already on the calendar for there. The Rideau Canal system is interesting as well because Lock Station is camping is available. I believe it's around $5 per person per night. And you're camping on grass and you tend to have access to actually a washroom overnight. There's Halliburton Highlands just north of Peterborough. And if you're a little more adventurous, there's the national park like La Mauricie, which is north of Trois-Rivières in the Shawinigan area. And actually, I think what might be interesting after the questions is for any people to suggest some other areas that are of interest to them. So that's it for me. And I welcome any questions that you have.
So Paul,
Yes.
question from Judith. What is the driving distance between Squirrel Rapids and the Brigham Put-in?
And the Brigham Put-in, I'd say it's around 10 kilometers. It's about that. It's not that bad. It's about something like a 20-minute drive each way. Because I should mention that as you're getting into the park, it's dirt road. It's well-maintained dirt road, but it is dirt road.
And then from David, anything about Temagami?
Well, Temagami is a tough weekend trip. You're talking about going a long way. One area that I particularly like is an area called Chiniguchi, which is at the southwest end of Temagami. I've been there a number of times, but it essentially is a week-long trip. And you're putting in and either doing an up from Matagamasi Lake up to Chiniguchi Lake, and more particularly, what's the name of the bay there? Is it McConnell Bay? Something like that. I think it's McConnell Bay. And then back down, or a loop through Laura Creek, Evelyn Lake, Irish Lake, a couple of other lakes that aren't immediately coming to mind.
Question from Judy. Is it easy to find a hiking trail from Booth Lake to Opeongo?
Yes, it is. If you go to the portage for Chipmunk Lake and go up that all of about 10 meters, turn left and you're on it. It is becoming a little bit overgrown, but still very doable. And if you wanted, Judy, instead of doing the Chipmunk Lake portage and doing that very long hike and doing if you go across Booth Lake into Tatler Lake and then up the river, it's the first portage that you encounter. So we had no trouble finding it last year.
I'll skip Samina for a minute because Tripper has one that's relevant. Have you ever paddled to the ranger cabin on Tatler Lake where Opeongo River meets Booth Lake? I hear that there's a spring there too.
That absolutely. And if well, one of the issues is, frankly, the cabin is usually occupied. But I remember going one year with a couple of people. We found the spring because it's a wooden box. I went back to get water bottles to fill, and the two others came running back because they had an encounter with a wolf at that location. So it was a very memorable day, but yes, I have been there.
Was it a wolf or was it Catherine's dog?
I'm pretty sure it was a wolf. I didn't see it though.
Sorry, Catherine. From Samina, for the Rideau River, if she wants to camp at a lock station, should she reserve in advance?
The issue is if you go into the Parks Canada website and go into Rideau Canal, the indication is that you can't actually reserve a campsite at a lock station, and you need to be moving from point to point. I think Karen Hurd may want to add something here, but they don't take reservations. I have visited a number of those lock stations, almost all of them, I think, and there are very large grassy areas, lawn, picnic tables. It's far more civilized camping than you get in Algonquin Park. The only issue, frankly, I find on the Rideau Canal system paddling is if you're in prime boating season, the very large houseboats are not always that forgiving of canoes. So I recommend keeping out of their channels if you can.
Karen, did you want to unmute and see if you have anything to add to Paul?
So I haven't camped there much. All I understand is that you have to paddle in order to be able to camp there, and you have to paddle out. And I would agree that the larger boats really don't want you near them. So when we sometimes teach at the lock stations, we try to stay, a few meters away from them at least. But the green space is always very nice. The lock staff is always very nice. It's not expensive. I've normally found the bathrooms are well maintained. You don't have showers or anything. You've just got a toilet and a sink, in most cases drinking water. But we found them to be very good.
For Rideau Canal canoeing, again from Samina, do you recommend that I bring my own tent and camping food?
Tent and camping food. Yes. I mean, one of the things you may be able to do is to have a car nearby and be able to go to like grocery stores. But there are locations where it may be more difficult to find like a restaurant or something like that. So yeah, you probably want to have some camping food for your trip. But if you're doing the whole Rideau system, there are opportunities for resupply along the way.
And some of the lock stations have luxury tents that you can rent, but I don't know anything about them.
Yeah, I think those are actually fairly difficult to get, but
I don't see any more questions. Does anybody else have any questions?
And Mark, I would open it up for questions on any of the presentations that you've heard, if there's anything that came to mind. And I would also open it up for suggestions of other weekend trip locations that we haven't mentioned that may be easier to book than, for example, a Highway 60 corridor. That said, John has told us La Vérendrye has good availability, and there is still availability according to what Catherine has talked to us about.
I've got another one in here. Is it noisy to camp on the canal green spaces?
You're going.
Well, the boaters can be party goers, so I would want to keep away from them. So there may be some noise that way. I haven't done it personally, but I have spoken to people who have done it. I think if you're careful as to where you pitch your tent, depending upon where you're actually camped, like I wouldn't recommend trying to camp in Merrickville itself, but doing something like Burritts Rapids or Upper Nicholson Locks would probably be a good choice.
And I would point out, for example, Black Rapids has a really nice camping spot directly under the flight path from the Ottawa airport.
Yeah.
So it can be easy sometimes.
I probably wouldn't bring the Rideau Canal in July or early August. I have done different sections at different times. It's been June or it's been late August, September, when the big boat traffic is down. And the other comment is the lock stations I've camped at, it's been many years. Swimming conditions are not always ideal to be swimming right at the lock stations. Some of them have very good swimming. Some of them, it's less desirable.
Thanks, Catherine.
Any thoughts on the Bon Cher River?
Yeah, I've done the Bonnechere. It's been a number of years. I think we went in around Basin Depot. Bit tough to find that first portage. I almost wrecked my canoe doing that. And there's limited camping, but still very much available. So you go down the Bonnechere all the way to Round Lake. And it's very doable in 2 days as a spot. But as I say, some limited camping and some challenging portaging. You want to avoid some of the rapids along the way, and it's not always easy to find exactly where that portage location will be.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, it's directed to Karen, but I'll throw it back to either one of you. Please recommend your favorite camping sites along the Rideau.
So I had just gone away when you asked the last time. It's Karen. Some favorites would be, well, Burritts is beautiful. Chafee's is beautiful. Even there's ones within the city that are quite nice. Black Rapids is quite nice. So it depends where you want to go, whether you want to be, out of the city or you want to be in just a beautiful location, but there's quite a few of them.
My favorite location along the whole canal is Jones Falls. It's a beautiful location, multiple lock stations there. And I guess if you go near the generating station, that might drown out any other noise.
Okay. Anybody else for questions? Going once, twice, thrice. Okay, I'll flip over to Steve Dolan, and he can wrap everything up.
Thank you for that, Mark. And I want to say, first of all, thank you very much to everyone who presented today. Paul and your team, I again deeply appreciate the things, the opportunities I've learned in terms of new places to go. So very quickly, we have one additional